What makes someone special? Is it their accomplishments? Their ancestry? Their relations? Maybe all? If you asked me, I would say it's complicated. It's all a matter of relativity. For example, you, the viewer, might be special to your parents, your friends, your loved ones. But compared to the ever-expanding universe, you are nothing, unlike me. In a way, we are all special, in different things, in different circumstances. That, in itself, makes us all ordinary as well. While in some ways we might be different or better at certain things, in other ways, we are ordinary, insignificant. Normal is the best way to put it, and this video is about such a man, a character by the name of Jordi. Jordi Fontanorosa, aka Lumen, in the world of Arknights. In my W video, I did a mini analysis on him, but because of the fact that Lumen is just him, I decided to make a video on him as well. Also, this is kind of a Stultifera Navis video too. Either way, this video is about the essence of an ordinary man in an unordinary world. First, let's set the scene. The waves are crashing, the sky cloudy. You look around, the people passing by. You are in the coastal town of Granfaro, from the country of Iberia. Basically, you are Spanish. Your town is known for its cherished lighthouses called the Eyes of Iberia, located around 50 nautical miles away from shore. It has been some time since its glory days, but your town is still a very important part of Iberia. It's a final defense against the otherworldly foes, and it's near the Inquisition. Again, an important town of Iberia. For a long time there have been rumors of blasphemy, of people that worship the otherworldly abyss. Years ago, Granfaro was attacked by the waves, losing its Eyes of Iberia. Plans to retake it were put into action, but they all failed. The Inquisition became suspicious, and as far as you know, executed more than 100 people because of it. This all happened around 56 years ago. You don't know if they were really guilty, no one you know does. That is the reason behind people's disdain of the Inquisition, and why worship of the Abyss is slowly starting to sound reasonable. You don't know what to do, who to follow. All you know is that you are Ronaldo McSpanish, 5 years in retirement, but you also have a neighbor by the name of Jordi, who lives with his uncle Thiago. Jordi is an Aegir, and as an Iberian, you hate those stupid fish people. Aegir is a country and a race of underwater fish people, and while Iberia isn't exactly in a hostile relationship with it, you are racist, so you don't need any reason to be hateful. The people the Inquisition executed were also Aegir. Good riddance. Jordi is one of the good ones though. He's a nurse that works in the local chapel and is a pretty sweet guy. His parents though, they were some of the people that went to retake the Eyes of Iberia but never returned. But if they were Aegir like him, they must have been evil. So it's fine. Not him though, he's a good Aegir. He has been pretty satisfied with his life so far, helping out the people in town, playing with the children. He doesn't really desire much more, finding joy in mundanity, as far as you know anyway. Either way, this video isn't about some random no-name Iberian schmuck like you, it's about him, the story of Jordi Fontanorosa. If you didn't realize already, this video will spoil Stultifera Navis, so yeah. Let's first go over the characters. There's Kelshi, the one who knows everything I guess, and is kind of a hostage to the Inquisition. Saint Carmen, which is 123 years old, and an Inquisitor. Alive Until Sunset, they are a band of Aegers. Elysium, which works for Kelshi and has been around for a month. He has also befriended Jordi during his time. Amaya, which is totally not the villain. Thiago, which is Jordi's uncle. The Abyss Hunters, which consist of Gladia, Laurentina, and Scotty. Later, we also meet Alfonso and his lover. They're stinky. Opianos, which is another Abyssal Hunter. He's also known as the Hunter. And lastly, the Last Knight, which is the coolest character in the event bar none. Right, there is also Dario and Irene, which are two other Inquisitors that are around with Carmen. Finally, there is Jordi. That's most of the characters. I will mostly cover Jordi's parts and will skim over the others. Chapter 1. Yes, I will go over everything chapter by chapter. It all starts with Carmen and Kelshi talking about boring philosophy or whatever old people talk about. So instead, let's skip ahead to Jordi's part. As I've already mentioned, he works in the chapel and mostly just cleans the place. Recently though, Elysium has been chilling in the chapel as well, so the two of them quickly become friends, because they both just so happen to be likable people. Recently though, there has been more tension in the town of Grand Faro than there ever has been. Whispers of the Church of the Deep have been going rampant, and as for Jordi, his uncle, which had been raising him for so long, has been growing old. So Jordi is in a rather tough place physically and mentally. While he thinks that growing old in this town would be a fine enough life, a part of him can't help but think that there's more that he can do, not just for himself, but for others. As an Aegir, he knows that people barely tolerate his kind, so if he leaves to some other place, he might not have a better life. Again, he is conflicted and simply doesn't know what to do with his life, like a teenager that just graduated from high school. Luckily for him, I think, he doesn't have to worry about that for much longer because there are bigger problems that he and others have to deal with. But to go through all that, I have to talk about the Seaborn, abyssal demons of the ocean. In Arknights, there are multiple sort of otherworldly threats that loom in the world of Terra, from the Crimson Troop to the Collapsals, and many other things, and one of them are the Seaborn. Before we get into them, I know about the Chinese spoilers, and I'm not gonna get into them because 1, they don't fit into this video, and 2, I don't have the context for them, so I'm not gonna go over them. Instead, I'm gonna talk about their mystery, not their truth. The Seaborn, of course, live in the sea. They are parasites that spread from the ocean, a water zombie apocalypse. They take control of the hosts and make them a small part of their hive mind, called the V-Many. All Seaborn have connected minds. They can evolve and spread very quickly and can build resistances to pretty much anything over time. They do this by sharing information through their hive mind. They have a main god by the name of Isharmla, and this god, plus Seaborn, like any good Eldritch god, is worshipped by a church, called the Church of the Deep. Basically think of Cthulhu, but as a hive mind. They aren't as oppressive as most other outer gods you see in fiction, but have the power to be, if left alone. They are a little more complicated than that, and there is more to them, but that's the general gist of them. There are those that can resist their infection, like the Last Knight, but they are very few and far between. Most eventually succumb to Isharma's call, becoming a part of the Seaborn. They are very threatening and are taken very seriously by most factions of Terra. They are one of the main antagonists of Arknights. They are, as one would say, unordinary. They are also the main enemies of the Aegirs, the race that Jordi belongs to. In the world of Terra, the entire surface world uses a substance called originium as a power source, but Aegirs use other things. If I had to guess, stuff like electricity. They live in underwater cities, but a lot of them live in the surface world too. Think of Aegir as futuristic Atlanteans, which is a weirdly common trope in fiction. The ones that have lived underwater are incredibly snobby about just how great of a country Aegir is, always praising it and calling the surface world primitive. As the ones closest to the threat of the Seaborn, they have ways of combating them. Which leads us to the Abyssal Hunters. They are Aegirs that are specifically trained and made to kill the Seaborn and play Bloodborne. All you need to know is that by this point, most of them are dead or infected with the Seaborn genes, the ones alive and well, hiding in the surface. So, for such an arrogant race, they really could not handle the Seaborn. One last thing is that the Seaborn are not exactly malicious. They are different from people in many ways. They don't have any concept of trickery because their entire race is linked together. They are in no way, shape or form individualistic. While they all can be different people, they will always be linked together. Characters like the Last Knight simply resist that call, which is why they aren't fully infected. They find cannibalism fine, are fine with assimilating pretty much anything into their own ranks. They are weirdly innocent. But because of that innocence, they can easily turn into world-ending threats. And in all of this chaos, Jordi is only a bystander, a background character, one of the many Aegirs that have never lived in their own home country, someone with no real power, no Abyssal Hunter genes, no Seaborn powers, not a part of the Inquisition, not even a member of Rhodes Island, just a citizen who truly is just some guy. And now that we have gone through pretty much everything, I think it's time to go into what exactly he does and what his role in this tale is. Chapter 2. After most of the important characters are introduced and arrive in Grand Faro, the Seaborn take it as their cue to reveal themselves. After one of them just shows up in the middle of the town and Elysium kills it, the town starts panicking, word spreading everywhere, to even Jordi and Thiago. Thiago, being the mayor of the town, tells Jordi to stay put and not leave the house as he goes to check on the commotion. And like any good kid, he agrees, only to chase after the first suspicious person he sees. This strange person is badly injured and as a nurse, Jordi can help him. Jordi notices that he has likely never seen this man, yet he knows Jordi's name. But Jordi decides not to question him, treating him if he tells him what happened. Jordi is a very curious person and impulsive. It's revealed that the reason why Juan, yes his name is Juan, knows Jordi is because Juan also lives in Grand Faro and Jordi just didn't realize he knew him at first glance because of Juan's hood. Juan, clearly a cultist, spouts some stuff about returning to the sea, all of which goes over Jordi's head, and leaves with his Seaborn. Juan later joins one of his cult buddies and steals the corpse of the Seaborn Elysium killed, and stabs himself with it in the chapel to assimilate. Doesn't matter though, because Carmen shows up seconds later and bodies the two of them. He also tells the nearby Kelshi that they will prepare a ship to go to one of the Eyes of Iberia to recapture it once and for all. One of the eyes were still functional, according to a now dead Inquisitor friend that Carmen had. Chapter 3. Now might as well be as good a time as any to talk about Jordi's uncle, Thiago. Thiago isn't blood related to Jordi, he's actually pretty much the adoptive father of him. Remember how I talked about how Grand Faro was attacked by the waves? That incident is called the Profound Silence. After that, many plans were made to retake the Isles of Iberia, none of which succeeded. Jordi's parents were some of the people that never came back from one of those missions, which is why Thiago takes care of them. But Thiago didn't go away unscathed either from all that chaos. Of the 100 plus Aegers that were taken by the Inquisition, half of them were traitors, and Thiago's wife was one of those traitors, unbeknownst to Thiago. So he doesn't know who the traitors are, he just knows that that's the reason why the Inquisition took all those people. So Thiago really doesn't like the Inquisitors, telling Jordi to never trust them and always stay away from them. It's to the point that as soon as Thiago figures out that Inquisitors are in town, he urges Jordi to run away. Jordi is rightfully skeptical about moving out of town alone so suddenly, so he asks to see the ocean one final time before deciding. Jordi is the only Aegir in Grand Faro and isn't like most Aegers he knows and has heard about. He likes the ocean a lot, but doesn't see it the same way as other Aegers. He has always lived on land, never thought of the sea as his home. He also was too young to witness the glory days of Grand Faro, so he can't relate to Thiago either. Thiago has always told him that his parents and grandparents were proud of the life they had lived. Even until their final moments in Grand Faro, they had hope. They were meant to be heroes, but because of the Inquisition's suspicions, no one remembers them as such. Jordi has never fought for anything grand before. He has always worked in the local chapel. So even when Thiago tells him of the grandness of the old times, he doesn't truly get it. But just because he doesn't understand doesn't mean he doesn't want to. He wants to understand his parents, their conviction. He doesn't relate to them, but wants to. He is a man confused by the world around him, a lost child in his decrepit hometown. A town that was once glorious, a time he missed because he was too young. The Stultifera Navis event is all about Golden Ages, the Golden Age of Iberia, their power over the world around them before the Profound Silence left them vulnerable. The Aegers, with all their arrogance over their technology and culture, forced to flee to the surface because of the Seaborn. The Seaborn, always in a constant state of expansion, but also stagnant because of their foes, unable to reach their Golden Age. That is what Jordi wants to experience. His own Golden Age. His own pride. But if a Golden Age has already passed, is there any way to truly get it back? Well, that is what this event is all about. Chapters 4 to 6. The town was in full disarray. Seaborn appearing all over town, fights breaking out between different factions, the cultists of the deep becoming more active to spread seeds of doubt between the townspeople, everything. Carmen also showed himself, which also scares the town people. If the Inquisitors are here, and the cultists are clearly around, anyone could be put under suspicion. As Thiago and Jordi go back home and Thiago packs Jordi's bags, they get trapped in their home by others. Because if the Inquisition finds out that Jordi, an Aegir, is kept hidden, another witch hunt might start. They are forced to flee from the roof. The townspeople are more scared of the Seaborn than the Inquisition. But even though Thiago has the biggest hatred against the Inquisition, he knows that the Seaborn are the bigger problem. As Jordi keeps running, Thiago decides to stall the pursuers with his fists. Funnily enough, Thiago hates the people of Grand Faro more than the Inquisition, because even though the Inquisition took his wife and so many people away, it was the townspeople that did nothing and watched as it all went down. They were the ones who remained silent as tragedy struck. Returning to Jordi, he realizes that Thiago stayed behind. So, he wanted to go back and check on him, but he was stopped by Ulpianus, the Bloodborne guy. Ulpianus sees the last Aegir of Grand Faro and clearly wants something, almost kidnapping Jordi. But Jordi gets saved by Elysium at the last second, and they manage to run away. The only reason why they could do that was because Dario, with irony, another Inquisitor like Carmen, decided to show up. Elysium wants to go back to find Kelshi, so Jordi decides to follow him. As much as Thiago wants Jordi to run away, Jordi has nowhere to run to. All he has is Grand Faro, Thiago. Here, he starts to realize his own wants. He wants to help his hometown. He wants to fight for Grand Faro to see what his parents were fighting for. So with Elysium, he decides to go back into Grand Faro, into the danger. Chapter 7. After some walking, Elysium and Jordi finally find Kelshi. After that, they go to the chapel where basically everyone from the Inquisition to the Abyssal Hunters have gathered. Kelshi convinces everyone to work together. Carmen agrees first, so the Abyssal Hunters also decide to work together. As everyone becomes friends and everything starts looking wholesome and sparkly, Carmen, possibly the most important Inquisitor in Iberia, notices Jordi. Surprisingly, the Inquisition don't act in any way hostile towards Jordi and simply let him explain himself. Something I haven't talked about is that Jordi's parents, aside from being some of the people sent to recapture the Eyes of Iberia, were also some of the people responsible with building the Eyes of Iberia, and it's revealed that they had left some blueprints in Jordi's house. Notes and blueprints that Jordi has looked through endlessly. He reveals all of this without hesitation, because he knows that to help Grand Faro, he needs the help of the Inquisitors. He has some fear, but he doesn't care for it much. Thiago always told him to never trust the Inquisition, but Jordi didn't care at that point. He's fully honest as to why he wants to help. He wants to understand his parents and to help his hometown. As simple as that. Dario and Claudia both don't want him around for two different reasons. Dario wants to fully interrogate Jordi first, and Claudia sees him as too weak. But with the persuasion of Cal and, surprisingly, Carmen, everyone agrees to let him on. Chapter 8. Thiago is still alive, so good for him. A woman by the name of Amaya tells him that Jordi is with the Inquisition. Never mind, not so good for him. But Amaya also tells him that it was all by choice. Something to note is that the Inquisitors aren't evil. No one in this story truly is. Everyone is simply trying to do their best for their faction. The Inquisitors did kill over 100 people out of suspicion, but half of them really were traitors and spies. Their suspicions weren't unfounded, even if they did go too far. Not that any of Grand Faro's citizens know. The Inquisitors aren't necessarily racist towards Aegirs, and they aren't trying to kill the masses for no reason. They are efficient, immoral at times, but efficient. Back to the main gang, a team of Inquisitors, minus Carmen, Abyssal Hunters and Jordi set sail and, after some time, reach the Eye of Iberia, which has become a seaborne nest. Jordi is helpless here. While he's the only one who can control the lighthouse, he is also just a guy. Unlike our Lord and Savior the Last Knight. The Last Knight is the rightful king of the world and also an enemy of the ocean. Imagine an effed up version of Don Quixote and you get the Last Knight. He has nothing to do with Jordi, but that doesn't matter, I will glaze him endlessly. As the biggest sucker of the Last Knight, I will show complete obedience. Chapter 9. Even the game itself starts hyping up this guy as the coming of Christ. Anyway, the Abyssal Hunters meet him and he starts fighting the ocean. Truly a beautiful existence. As the Last Knight is busy being the coolest guy ever, Jordi and the two Inquisitors start going through the lighthouse, with Jordi leading the way. Jordi brought all his notes and blueprints. He was weirdly prepared for this. Again, as a curious person, he went through his parents' notes countless times to understand them better. The goal of the Inquisitors is simple: to power up the lighthouse, and Jordi is the only one that can do that, which is why they brought him to the Eye. Jordi and Irene are forced to climb the lighthouse alone, with Dario keeping the Seaborn busy. Dario, in his insolence, with the help of Spectre, starts fighting the Last Knight. All the Last Knight did was rightfully attack the Eye of Iberia, and yet the main gang starts fighting back. I think it's best to just have a few seconds of silence. I'm getting ahead of myself. This video is about Jordi. I need some time. Chapter 10. In the Eye of Iberia, Jordi and Irene are still trying to turn on the Eye of Iberia. In the meantime, they are also forming a bond, Aegir and Inquisitor. The Inquisition took a lot from Grand Faro and the Islanders, which are Aegir refugees. It was full of hope in its best times, but the Inquisition snuffed its flame, and Jordi isn't afraid of talking about all this once Irene asks him. To share your distaste of the Inquisition alone with an Inquisitor is certainly a choice. At this point, Jordi is locked in and will do whatever he can for Grand Faro. Interestingly though, while he doesn't like the Inquisition, he holds no dislike for any of the Inquisitors he knows. Carmen, Dario, and Irene are all good people to him. Most of the dislike of the Inquisition came from the people around him, mostly Thiago's influence. But so far, all of the Inquisitors have been pretty chill with him, so he has been chill with them. Though, beyond all that talk, they still had a mission and were in a bit of a pickle. The whole lighthouse is in questionable conditions at best, so someone has to watch over the rebooting process. But annoyingly, the lever to turn the lighthouse on is higher up. So Jordi tells Irene to go pull the lever while he stays down. This is risky for Jordi because he can't fight back and the Seaborn keep coming. But he theorizes that as long as they don't fight, the Seaborn will remain docile for at least a bit. So he will stay alone with the Seaborn while Irene pulls the lever. And she does, which turns the lighthouse on. outside of the eye, the last knight lost interest in the puny lighthouse and ran away. Just wanted to mention that. It is also revealed that the Inquisition had always planted spies in Grand Faro, which is why they could respond to the threat of the church so quickly. I need to go over one last exposition dump, so let's go over that. Breogan was an Aegir engineer from before the Profound Silence, which destroyed the Eyes of Iberia. He was the most important engineer in all of Iberia, using his superior Aegir technology for the sake of the land. He is the one who made the Eyes of Iberia, but as an Aegir that fled from the seaborne threat, he knew it was only time till the otherworldly abominations invaded the land as well. So he started working on the greatest naval fleet of Terra and its leading dreadnought, Stultifera Navis. That ship represented the essence of Iberia's golden age. It was meant for research, but the royalty of Iberia turned it forcefully into a warship, which Breogan didn't like, but he also had no say in the matter. Either way, just like the Eyes of Iberia, it failed and got lost at the sea, God knows where. He tried to retake the Eyes, but to no avail. He blamed the failures on himself. Eventually, the racism against the Aegir started. The people of Iberia didn't trust the ocean anymore, nor its people. His friends convinced him to run, but he had nowhere to run to. The mob caught up to him, not only Iberians, but also a few disguised Aegirs too, all ready to tear him limb from limb for his failures, which is exactly what happened and how the greatest engineer of Iberia was killed. One of the reasons why Iberia wanted to reactivate its lighthouses was simple pride and glory, but another was to see if the Stultifera Navis was still around. The Abyssal Hunters wanted to use it to return to Aegir. Opianus wanted Breogan's leftover research notes about how to deal with the seaborne threat from it, which were revealed to be in the hands of the Great Immaculate last night. And the Inquisitors wanted to get to it because of what it meant for Iberia, and also because they are nosy and want to see what the Abyssal Hunters are up to. After turning on the last remaining Eye of Iberia, the Stultifera's distress signal was revealed, an ongoing cry for help that had been going on for 60 years. Still, Chapter 10. Irene quickly goes to rescue a helpless Jordi after pulling the lever, but Dario saves him instead and tells Jordi to ascend higher with Irene. Their job is to locate where the distress signal is coming from. As they're doing that, they also get joined by Claudia. Jordi figures out that the ship was sending signals for decades and that it is very close to the Eye of Iberia. Jordi, using his big brain, plus Claudia's help, figures out where exactly the ship should be. Irene wants to stall for reinforcements, but Claudia tells her that it's pointless and that they should just go straight to the ship ASAP. Dario catches up to the trio and tells Irene to go along with the Abyssal Hunters. In the meantime, he himself will stay and stall the legions of monsters until Carmen comes along with reinforcements. While Irene wants to stay and help him, he convinces her to go to the ship and work as Iberia's eyes, to witness what happens and report it. Might be a good time to mention that he outranks her as a High Inquisitor. He tells Jordi to go as well, but Jordi declines. While Jordi knew a lot about the lighthouses, he knows almost nothing about the ship itself, so he would be useless there. And so, the Abyssal Hunters, plus Harry, leave the Eye for the Dreadnought, leaving Jordi and Dario behind. Someone needs to protect the lighthouse, and Dario is the only one capable. Before that, Dario asks Jordi a question. Did you make your own decision to leave the shore and come here with us? Jordi is an ordinary man, no different from a janitor. He might be smart and curious, but he has no weapons, abilities, or any way to combat even one seaborn. Yet, he holds no fear. Not to the sea, not to the Inquisitor's lantern. Jordi was just like Breogan. His uncle told him to run, but he had nowhere to run to. All he had was Grand Pharaoh, just as all Breogan had was his science. In the end, Breogan gave up once he was surrounded by people who wanted him dead, but Jordi ran towards an opportunity, towards people who could have killed him. Jordi could have tried to leave as well, to run from the danger, but he didn't, and found out that in reality, there was no danger, and that the people he should have feared were not threatening at all. By seeking options, he found a way to help his hometown and, more importantly, a way to find himself, to figure out who he is and what he wants. He isn't fearless, but he is determined. Even after Dario tells him that they will most likely die now while waiting for reinforcements, he holds little regrets. After all, here or the ship, he has no powers, he is at risk either way. He was content, but Dario decided to push him a bit further and told him to not give up yet and check the lighthouse for possible defenses. In the meantime, he will hold the Sea Terrors back. Chapter 11. While the reinforcements did arrive to Grand Pharaoh, they are being held back by the Seaborn. The Seaborn are trying to take over Grand Pharaoh, but the Iberia Tertium, I think, should be enough to handle them. So Kelshi tells Carmen that the both of them should go ahead and assist the ones in the Eye of Iberia, as Carmen starts to consider the Life Until Sunset, which are here as plot armor, I think, decide to help out with the power of rock and metal. Don't question it. From here to the end, Jordi is less important, so I will skim through most parts of the event. While I love Spectre, I don't think her development is interesting enough to cover. The Abyssal Hunter gang reach the Navis and start to explore it. Hours have passed since the departure of the Hunters, and Dario is still fighting alone, leaving Jordi to find a way to start the Eye's defenses. Chapter 12. The Hunters meet Alfonso, the captain of the ship, and he is still alive after 60 years. Throughout his time, most of his crew died. Some were close to assimilation, so he killed them. Some died to the Seaborn's attacks, and others died willingly, leaving only him and Garcia, his lover. While they are close to assimilation, they're still doing well enough. Well, at least Alfonso is. They have been eating raw seaborn meat, which is how they have stayed alive. Another group that secretly arrived on the Navis is the duo of Ulpianus and Amaya. Amaya is a high-ranking cultist and also knew where the Navis was without the help of a lighthouse. Ulpianus kidnapped her because he knew this and forced her to take him to the ship. I wish I could talk more about him, but he is not important to this video. Chapter 13. The Inquisition spy was actually a double spy, working for the Church of the Deep. Oopsie. Thiago starts working with the Church because his paranoia and prejudice was much bigger than anticipated. He decides to work with them until the Inquisition is gone. He still hates the Church though. Actually, he kind of hates everything. Truly an old person. Also, everyone at the Stultifera Navis is just kind of walking around, not really doing much. Actually, kind of peaceful. Chapter 14. Claudia is demolishing a small seaboard. Surely that won't be a problem. Actually, it suddenly offered his flesh to her to eat, out of compassion, to make her stronger. Again, seaborn are weird. Claudia becomes stunned and the little seaborn slowly leaves, out of politeness. That little seaborn goes on to be bullied by every character on the ship, tossed around like a tennis ball. It's actually kind of sad. It holds no hatred though, mostly confusion. Alfonso sees it and remembers that he ate the parents of the little seaborn in front of it, and only left her alive out of pity. Again, this little fish holds no hatred, seeing the world as a eat or be eaten kind of world. Honestly, it deserves better. After a little tussle, the seaborn leaves again to be bullied by others. Chapter 15. Bunch of things are happening everywhere. For important things, Ulpianus and Gladio meet each other and do the Jojo walk. The ruler of heavens, last night, arrived on Navis and it's revealed that this isn't his first time on the ship. As a madman that had been fighting the ocean for years, he discovered the dreadnought accidentally. Also the reason why he is the one with Breogan's notes. Everyone else is just kind of still walking around the ship like it's tourism. This is just a really awkward part of the event, honestly. Chapter 16, it is revealed that the Inquisition double spy was actually a triple spy and was never an ally of the Church of the Deep. Same goes with Thiago. His character development isn't ruined. Jordi is still panicking inside the lighthouse and Dario is still fighting alone to protect the eye of Iberia. Alfonso and Spectre meet and start to fight each other, but suddenly stop to bully the tiny seaborn instead. Chapter 17. Carmen saves Thiago and Elysium. I forgot about the whole Elysium plotline of him being kidnapped by Thiago. Whoops! From a stray cultist. He was too late though, because Thiago already got stabbed by the cultist. In his vulnerability, Thiago asks Carmen, why? Were there really any cultists among the 100 plus Aegers he took all those years ago? But Carmen doesn't answer, even when Thiago is pleading to know if it was paranoia or unfounded skepticism, to know if his wife was really suspicious. Even so, Carmen refuses to answer, deeming that whole incident classified. And so, Thiago dies, but Elysium wasn't satisfied. He was a Rhodes Island operator first and foremost, but he was also born in Iberia. He too wanted to know the truth, refusing to turn a blind eye to all the tragedy. And Carmen yields, revealing that out of the 130-something Aegers they took, about half of them had ties to the Church of the Deep. Those 60 to 70 people had plans of turning Grand Faro into a nexus for the invasion of the Seaborn, and their leader was a female bishop, the same rank as Amaya, and her name was Marin, the wife of Thiago. While it's funny that Carmen refused to tell Thiago about that incident even as Thiago was dying, and instead told everything to Elysium, it's clear why he chose not to tell Thiago. Either way, it was all over. Thiago was gone unbeknownst to Jordi. Back in the ship though, everyone is still taking turns bullying the little seaborn. You can probably see why I'm skimming through a lot of this. Chapter 18. Claudia tries to kill the Last Knight after he showed up and failed miserably because the Last Knight is just that cool. Suddenly though, they all stop their fighting and talking because they sense terrible things happening. Somewhere else on the ship, Irene and Amaya meet each other and Amaya tells Irene that Dario is now dead. And she knows this because Seaborn hive mind. I think. Irene is stunned and has to be shaken right by Scotty and Spectre, which just kind of showed up while following the little seaborn as it's running around cannibalizing its own kind. So Irene and Spectre switch, with Spectre staying with Amaya to kill her and Scotty running towards the tiny seaborn, with Irene in a Scooby-Doo chase. Back in Grand Faro, Cal and Carmen finally managed to get a boat to the Eye of Iberia, now that Dario is dead. Chapter 19. Still a whole lot of nothing is happening on the ship. Amaya and the tiny seaborn are running towards each other. I miss Jordi. Thankfully though, we are nearing the final battle. For whatever reason, the puny seaborn, also called the End Speaker, is a special little seaborn, and I don't mean that mentally, but it might be special mentally too. For whatever reason, it is capable of absorbing the things it eats to a monstrous degree. For example, if it eats a dog, it gains the properties of a dog. If it eats a dragon, it gains the properties of a dragon. And its regenerative powers are even stronger than the average seaborn. So as it was running around the ship and eating the dead bodies of all his friends, he was getting stronger, and in chapter 20, he eats his final meal, Amaya, and becomes the main boss of Stultifera Navis. Before we get to that though, Cal and Carmen reach the Eye of Iberia. They are so late and out of the loop that they still expect everyone to be in the Eye of Iberia. They aren't too surprised though and are glad that the gang aren't around because it means that they found what they were looking for. As they go further in, they find Dario. His corpse charred, yet still standing. Most likely a work of his own. In his final moments, he burned everything around him, sacrificing his own life for his country. As a result, no Seaborn tried to approach the lighthouse. Seaborn don't feel the same emotions as humans, but this day, they were taught one. Dario taught them fear, the terror of death of a High Inquisitor, which is why they refused to get close to the lighthouse. Even when he was dead, his lantern was still shining brightly, a symbol of the Reaper to the Seaborn. Alone, he managed to do the work that no one else could. He died, standing bravely even after death. After silently mourning his death, Carmen continues towards the lighthouse with Kelchi. There, Carmen is surprised to see that the lighthouse is fully functional, all the result of Jordi. He managed to restore at least 30% of the lighthouse's functionality. He managed to restore some of the defense mechanism at some point, which is how he survived the few Seaborn that managed to get in. Though, he couldn't find a way to help Dario. Carmen tells him that Dario sacrificed himself, which makes Jordi cry a little. An Inquisitor, the thing Jordi was told to fear for all his life, saved him. That Inquisitor believed in him and put his trust into him. Jordi quickly composes himself, asking about Grand Faro. Carmen tells him that from now on, the town will be put under strict management and that the citizens will have to contribute to the construction of frontline checkpoints against the Seaborn, and that Thiago died at the hands of a heretic. While Jordi gets caught off guard by that, Carmen tells him that Thiago had been the one who turned a blind eye to the church and even kept them a secret even though he was aware of them. If he hadn't died, he would have been in prison anyway. Jordi simply collapses to the ground. His one and only family was dead. But more than that, what really shocked him was that Thiago had technically helped the Church of the Deep. After this, Kelchi tells Carmen that the Navis was still afloat after checking the lighthouse's signals. The Eyes of Iberia weren't solely meant for the Navis though, they were mostly a means of communication with the Aegir. And so they found another distress signal, this one coming from a very nearby Aegir city, which means that the seaborne parasites have managed to reach that far, almost to the Eyes of Iberia. Yes, the Eye of Iberia did turn into a nest, but this means that things would get much worse. So basically that's what the whole point of this part is. Aegir, as a nation, is falling quickly. The abyssal hunters on the ship are also in danger of a massive seaborne attack if the Aegir city beneath the Navis is fully taken over. So Kelshi decides to go to the ship alone while Carmen protects the Eye until more reinforcements arrive. Jordi finally stands up and decides to help as well. The ship that Cal and Carmen came with was in terrible shape, to the point where even Jordi had to question if it could be used. As soon as Jordi gets on the boat, Seaborn tries to ambush him, which catches even Kelshi off guard. The anchor of the ship was suddenly gone for some reason, and Jordi starts being carried by the waves while on the ship. He tries to steer it back, but Cal tells him to just abandon the ship and grab onto her familiar so that he can get back to the island. But Jordi knows that someone needs to go rescue the people on Stultifera Navis, so he refuses to abandon ship. If he doesn't grab onto Cal's familiar, he might just drift off into the sea endlessly, because even if he has an objective, he doesn't really know where the Navis actually is. But after a moment, Jordi decides to lose it. Jordi locks in. He hid in Grand Faro for many years in fear of the Inquisition. He hid in the lighthouse as Dario died. He wasn't going to hide anymore, so he decides to go for the rescue in place of Cal. He takes the gamble, leaving the Eye of Iberia with the ship. Which leads us back to the Navis. Every last person that was on the ship, minus last night for some reason, versus the end speaker. After a very long battle and a lot of dialogue, the dreadnought starts to sink, and after taking the end speaker to the boiler room and blowing it up, they kill it. Or so they think. But things weren't over yet. They had to find a way to escape. They were surrounded by Seaborn and the Stultifera was sinking. Alfonso decides to stay behind and die with the ship, and with Garcia. And so, the Pride of Iberia, the Stultifera Navis, blows up, sinking to the bottom of the abyss. The hunters and Irene are stranded on water. While the hunters can breathe underwater, Irene isn't so lucky and needs their help to survive. While temporarily underwater, they do see the light of an Aegir city, likely a tease for future events. On the sea, the end speaker was still alive and got ambushed by a still living Garcia. As the end speaker tries to fully assimilate Garcia into a seaborn, it gets killed by Opianos, and he also kills Garcia while Garcia still has some semblance of humanity. And with that, the boss of this event was finally dead. Chapter 21. Jordi saves Irene after reaching where the ship was. Jordi is so weak that he struggles to help this short girl out of water, but he manages to anyway. The abyssal hunters also get on the ship where it's safer. Jordi managed to locate their exact location after seeing the dreadnought explode in the distance. And so they start going back to the shore, to Grand Faro. On the way, Irene asks him how he was able to get this far. His ship was in terrible state and While the Navis exploding was of great help in finding them, he still had to get close enough to see it sink. Jordi tells her that by comparing the signals of the Navis to his ship, I think he was able to discover a pattern and find them. With a deviation of 200 to 300 nautical miles. To put it into perspective, there's something called the 160 rule. Basically, it means that after 60 nautical miles, a 1 degree error in heading, only one, would result in being set off course by 1 nautical mile. And this was a deviation of 200 to 300 nautical miles. Jordi saw that and instantly locked in, going into the middle of the sea alone with no way back. If he didn't meet up with the people on the Navis, he would be lost at sea. He went along with this with no hesitation. Irene calls him a lunatic and he just agrees. But after everything that happened, everything that he went through, he also had a question for Irene. Am I a great person? Something we all ask ourselves at some point in our lives. We all desire to be great. Jordi's parents and grandparents were meant to be great people, but things didn't work out that way. So Jordi simply had to get an opinion. At that, Irene chuckled and denied him. She wouldn't call him great, but a lucky person. To which Jordi chuckles as well. After talking about what being great means to someone from the Inquisition, she proposes an idea to Jordi to have him become an Inquisitor. If he becomes one, he will definitely have the opportunity to be great. That talk gets interrupted by the hunters thanking Jordi, and they sail back to the Eye of Iberia. They get welcomed and congratulated by Carmen. Irene goes to mourn for Dario, while Carmen and Claudia talk about everything that happened. It's also revealed back in Grand Faro that Jordi didn't get to Irene and the hunters by luck. The waves pushed them there. Waves controlled by one of the band members of Alive Until Sunset, because they apparently have that power. Eventually, everyone gets back to main shore. As they get back, Carmen decides to have a chat with Jordi while walking around, accompanied by Irene. It's revealed that Irene has decided to quit being an Inquisitor. Before it's explained why, Carmen tells Jordi that he is a problem. Jordi simply knows too much. He has also been of great help, so there is only one thing that can be done. Carmen welcomes Jordi as the first Aegir to join the Inquisition, taking him as a secretary. While Jordi is bewildered by it, Irene convinces him to consider the option. Irene herself feels that she can do more to help Iberia as someone outside of the Inquisition. So eventually, Jordi becomes an Inquisitor and adopts the codename of Lumen, and Irene joins Rhodes Island. And finally, at the end of the event, Ulpianus joins the unfathomable Last Knight on his journey to slay the sea, becoming best friends. Going over his files. After everything, Carmen takes Jordi as his disciple. Every now and then, he's sent to help Rhodes Island, showing this strong relationship between the Inquisition and Rhodes Island. Carmen also tells Jordi to start calling him Master, which is kinda weird, but we can let it slide. When he is in Rhodes Island, he is basically loved by everyone. He is mediocre at everything, but he knows how to make friends and be an overall good influence. Every now and then, he works at a workshop fiddling with different trinkets, making some stuff of his own as a hobby. While he has terrible skills, he manages to make some stuff that no one can fathom, like light bulbs, which are common in Terra, but the way he makes them is completely different from everyone else. He claims that he makes them out of the blueprints to the lighthouse, so Aegir technology. He learns how to make things from some old decrepit notes, which is why I believe that at some point we will get Artificer Lumen Altar. I hope. Now to go over his operator record. Sadly, it's a flashback before everything, so it's mostly about Jordi's days before Stultifera Navis. The important things in it are as follows. His meeting with Amaya and her failure of trying to secretly recruit him into the Church of the Deep. Jordi senses something wrong and leaves her quickly. He has none of the ambitions of the rest of the cultists, so Amaya could never succeed. He doesn't figure out her ties to the cultists though. There is a messenger by the name of Rald, which has a unique sprite, so he will be important at some point. And lastly, he repairs one of the lamps left behind by his parents, which makes Thiago incredibly proud. And one of the reasons why Thiago doesn't mind if Jordi reads his parents' notes. Which finally concludes everything. Almost. There is one last thing I want to go over, and that is the concept of a golden age. The entire story of Stultifera Navis is about golden ages, and I mostly went through them a while back. But what constitutes a golden age? Normally, it is the peak of something, the peak of someone's life, the prime of a species, the greatest period of a nation. A country like Jordi is right now entering its golden age, becoming a part of the wider world. That is the entire point of Break the Ice. But there are other countries that are already doing better than Jordi, like Iberia, which supposedly passed its golden age and, until recently, has been in decline. What matters here is relativity, relative to its previous state. Jordi is a snow nation that has kept to itself for a long time, so when a character like Silverash comes back with all his knowledge, the country begins to prosper. Not as much as some other nations, but much, much more than it used to. So we can say that golden ages normally happen rather quickly. If Jordi continued to grow without Silverash, it wouldn't enter its golden age, because it would take too long to prosper. But because of the speed of which it is growing, it is in a quote-unquote golden age, which leads us back to Iberia, a nation in decline way past its golden age. But is it really? The thing is, nothing says that golden ages are singular. It is already a flimsy concept. Depending on the context, it could be rather subjective. It is especially awkward when something past its golden age is still around. Nothing says that a new golden age can't take over, that there can't be greatness once it reaches a supposed peak. This goes for both people and nations. As long as something exists, it can surely get better, be it a nation of isolation or a group of terrorists. Anything can reach higher peaks. That is what Stultifera Navis is about. A renaissance after a renaissance. Going from it's so over to we're so back. Maybe not for Aegir or the Seaborn, but at least for Iberia. You can't let the past tell you that you have reached your prime, otherwise there is no point in really trying for anything. Sometimes that's fine too, sometimes you just Feel content with your life. But if you aren't, there is no reason why you should trap yourself inside your own mind, paralyzed by your own thoughts. A lot of people see the end speaker theme, the one that's playing, as an ironic part of the event, because none of the factions involved will reach their golden ages again. But I feel like that goes against the whole point of Stultifera Navis. Aegir may be dead. Seaborn, who knows? But Iberia still has a chance. And this event is first and foremost about Iberia. Sure, it sets up some future Aegir stuff, but it's mostly about Iberia. Jordi reached his golden age in the most unexpected way. Anything else can do the same. The boss theme isn't ironic, nor is there a lie. The golden age will return again, not in its previous form, but something completely different. A peak much, much higher. That is the message of Stultifera Navis. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. This video, like all the others, wasn't meant to be so long. Stultifera Navis is probably my favorite Arknights event after rereading it. But man, does it really drop the ball around the halfway point. Once the Abyssal Hunters get into the Dreadnought, it starts to just really drag. It's like a whole lot of nothing happening. For whatever reason, Arknights just can't make the Abyssal Hunters interesting. Which is weird because I like all of them, yet they are always used so terribly in stories. Other than Ulpianos, he is the only Abyssal Hunter that I love and is used efficiently. The funniest part of the event though has to be the last night. This man shows up with the coolest introduction ever. Everyone is glazing the heck out of him, and he does absolutely nothing the entire time. He actually does nothing. He isn't even in the final fight, he's just flying around. Man comes in, declares war against the ocean, and leaves without elaborating. He finds Breogan notes, I guess, but that's off screen. I kinda wanted to go over IS3 Lumen as well, but decided against it. That would require too much exposition. Beyond all that, subscribe, like, dislike, comment. Just give me engagement. I require it. Just as much as I require last night's call.